I recently did a review of that drone on my mountain bike channel, but since this is a camera channel, I thought that you might be interested in the HOVERAir X1 Pro as well. So here's that review. It's exactly 1 year ago since I tested the HOVERAir X1, and now it's time for the HOVERAir X1 Pro. 00 Robotics calls these drones flying cameras, but I think the HOVERAir X1 has turned into an action drone. Let's take this from the beginning. The previous HOVERAir X1 really was a selfie camera, but I wanted it to be an action camera. That's where the Pro version comes into the picture. It seems as if us testers get random packages of the new Hover. I was hoping for the Pro Max, but I got the Pro and a cycling package. That includes the drone with 2 batteries and a charger, a set of ND filters, this thing that does many things, and a bag to put on the frame of the bike. In addition, I also got these controllers that latch onto the beacon. That's a lot of things here, and the drone itself has even got a built-in 32GB memory card, which is awesome since quality memory cards are quite pricey. My drone had a 64GB memory card for some reason, and I never even bothered to get an external memory card. But it's good that the option is there if the internal memory should fail in the future. I find that this bike package is more aimed for road cycling than mountain biking. I don't feel comfortable having the drone relatively unprotected on the frame. Where I ride, it's very shaky, and sometimes I crash. This holder for the beacon doesn't work in the rough either. Luckily, the beacon can be fitted to any GoPro mount, and that works a whole lot better. I put the drone in a hard case and place it in my fanny pack instead, but here is an issue that I found. The X1 Pro is a bit bigger than the original X1, so my old hard case will not do, and I never really found a new hard case with a good fit. So I had to buy a hard case that was so big that it didn't fit my fanny pack, or any pocket for that matter. I had to cut off the latches to shoehorn the thing into my bag. Come on 00 Robotics, you gave us an action drone, now get us a durable hard case that can take a crash and that fits the drone snugly. Let's start with the speed test and go from there. The top speed, I'm assuming in follow me mode, is 42 km/h, and temporarily it flies up to 60 km/h. I don't really reach 60 km/h here, but I had the top speed at about 45. One very important thing to notice here is the speed of the descent. I can happily report that the X1 Pro follows my altitude better than the X1, at the higher speed too, of course. That's an absolute must for skiers and downhill bikers, and this is something that the original Hover struggled with. It goes high in this steep slalom hill though, until the speed decreases again, and that is a concern when flying between trees. I found that as long as you don't go too fast though, the altitude is kept under control. And this brings us to the next test. Going uphill in dolly track mode also works differently with the X1 Pro. A problem I used to have with the X1 was that it simply crashed straight into the ground when it got steep. But even here, in a very steep slalom hill, the X1 Pro keeps on flying. This is shot with the flat mode, where the drone is supposed to fly low, and I think the video turns out pretty well. I suspect that the sensor underneath the drone plays a part here as well. The drone jumps up a bit in different places when it needs to, as if it senses the ground coming too close. It works in the same way in these automated modes too, so I'm not as worried anymore that I will crash into the ground simply because of the steep terrain. The tracking works wonderfully well, and you might wonder, do I really need to purchase this beacon? Well, the beacon does a lot of things, but for me, the only function I'm interested in is the tracking function. It's an additional tracking signal that works together with the camera to track an object. How this works is somewhat of a mystery, since 00 Robotics hasn't released any information on the subject. Here's my wild guess of how it works. There seems to be a signal between the beacon and the drone. Whether it's a Wi-Fi or a radio signal, I don't know. Both the beacon and the drone seem to connect to GPS satellites after a while. And therefore it's important to wait a few minutes to let both parts connect properly, which is indicated with this link icon that needs to be fully lit. I also suspect that the new omni-terrain function, that's the function that lets the drone fly over water or snow for instance, really is a GPS tracker. It takes about 30 seconds for that icon to appear. I'm assuming that the signal between the beacon and the drone keeps the drone going towards the beacon until the camera of the drone finds my silhouette again. I got a handlebar mount in my bike kit, and apparently you should mount the beacon somewhere in the open to have a strong signal. I guess you could mount the beacon on top of the helmet too, but then you can't see the display. The display is very convenient since I can see if the drone is still with me or not, which was somewhat of a problem with the old X1. The new X1 Pro is also a lot quieter than the old drone, which seems like a good thing, but I cannot hear the drone as clearly as before. Another reason to rely on the beacon instead of hearing if the drone is still following. The old X1 went wide in the corners. The X1 Pro is much more exact, but it cuts corners and flies in a more straight line towards me. I prefer that, but when the trees are too close, it will crash. I strongly recommend to fly this in the open, or at least in places where the trees and bushes aren't this close. It will not avoid objects in follow me mode. You could use only the beacon to control the drone, in a pinch that is. It's more for retrieving the drone if it should get stuck somewhere up in the air and you can't reach it. But if you connect it to this part of the controller, you can actually fly it rather smoothly by tilting the controller and using this joystick. Everything while seeing what goes on in this little display. The display is quite small though. You can also connect this other piece and get a fully fledged controller for even smoother flights. Add a smartphone here and maybe this drone can be your only drone. Let's play with that thought. This drone shouldn't be seen as merely an upgrade to the older X1. This is a giant leap forward into the future of drones considering the much improved tracking function, but also with the introduction of GPS and a proper controller. I can use this drone in the same way as my DJI drone if I wanted to, and that makes the X1 Pro very versatile. But to compete in areas besides of the autonomous functions of the X1 Pro, the image quality needs to be on par. Here is where I start to feel the limit with using the X1 Pro as my only drone. The image quality is miles better than that of the X1. But modern dedicated camera drones are way ahead. For what I'm doing here on my bike channel, the X1 Pro is enough. When I film for paying clients though, it's not. I'm limited to the look that the X1 Pro spits out and I cannot change much in post since there is no log profile or a 10-bit color depth. And I also said that in my review of the old X1. A flat picture profile, preferably a log profile, together with a 10-bit color depth is the standard in action cameras in 2023. Chances are that when you're watching this video, it's 2025. Again, I'm okay with the image, but I would like to be able to expose and move the colors of the sky, for example, to make it look a bit more natural. And no, you don't need 10 bits. It's more a nice to have thing, to avoid banding in the image, for instance, if you start moving the colors. If you never do any color correction, you decide if you like the look of the image or not. I think it's okay. The X1 Pro Max has got a different sensor with 10 bits and it also comes with the HLG picture profile. I haven't got that drone, so I cannot say what the image is like or if it's worth that extra money. It's almost impossible to not mentioning DJI's new Neo drone here. And I kind of thought that the X1 Pro was released a bit early because of the introduction of the Neo. There has been a few software glitches along the way, but here's where you need to decide if you can trust the company 00 Robotics or not. The little interaction I've got with the company has been positive so far, and it has been many firmware upgrades in a short period of time. Now I don't have any problems with connection, and there has also been a few new functions added. such as the long-awaited Find Me function. It can sometimes be very difficult to find the drone in the event of a crash, since it's so small and it's black too. I haven't used the Neo, but from what I've seen here on YouTube, the Neo doesn't compete with the X1 Pro. Possibly the X1 maybe. But the Pro models are far ahead of the Neo, both when it comes to traction, but also when it comes to image quality. The Neo has got its advantages, pricing being one of them for instance. But for me, who's doing mountain biking, the Neo is not the drone for me. This was the very last weekend before the bike parks closed for the winter here in Sweden, and I cannot film anything exciting before somewhere in May. I will possibly do a follow-up video and some more tests on the bike then. There will probably be quite a few firmware upgrades to talk about as well. But this will have to do for now. I will do more tests with the controllers and the ND filter shortly though. But since this really is a bike channel and not a drone channel, I will publish further tests on my camera channel instead. There is a link in the description if you're interested. So, be careful when you're flying there, and see you in the next video.